For years, I sat quietly at dinner while my family laughed at my boring secretary job, unaware of the clearance level in my pocket. In this hidden identity story, my family thought I was their disappointment, but they had no idea I was the only thing standing between them and prison. My name is Paisley Nelson, and to the outside world, specifically to the people who share my DNA, I am nothing more than a dull, unambitious administrative assistant working in the basement of the Department of Agriculture. If you asked my mother, Eleanor, she would tell you with a sigh that I file reports on corn subsidies. If you asked my father, Robert, he would shake his head and say I lack the killer instinct required for the real world of business. And if you asked my sister Vanessa, well, she would probably just laugh and ask if I needed a coupon for the buffet. I remember one specific Sunday dinner about 3 years ago that perfectly encapsulates my existence within the Nelson family hierarchy. We were seated at the long mahogany table in my parents' dining room. The room was designed to intimidate, with heavy drapes, oil paintings of ancestors who probably weren't even related to us, and a chandelier that cost more than my supposed annual salary. Robert was at the head of the table, carving a roast with the precision of a surgeon, while Vanessa held court. Vanessa was the golden child. She was the vice president of marketing for Nelson Global Imports, the family business. She was loud, she was flashy, and she was currently recounting her latest victory. She had just secured a contract with a distributor in Dubai. She was talking about luxury hotels, first-class flights, and the sheer power of her negotiation skills. My parents hung on her every word, their eyes shining with pride. Then there was the lull, the moment where the attention had to shift, purely out of social obligation, to the dark horse of the table. My mother turned to me, her smile tight and pitying. "So, Paisley, how is work going? Still organizing those filing cabinets?" I took a sip of water, feeling the cold glass against my fingers. "It is fine, Mom. We are currently auditing the grain reserves for the Midwest region. It involves a lot of paperwork." Vanessa snorted, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. "Oh, God, Paisley, I do not know how you do it. I would die of boredom. Literally, my brain would just shut down. Do you even talk to people, or is it just you and the dust bunnies down there?" "It is mostly data entry," I lied smoothly. "It's stable." "Stable," my father grunted, dropping a slice of beef onto my plate. "Stability is for people who are afraid to take risks. Look at your sister. She is out there conquering the world. You are, well, you are safe." Safe. That was the word they used to insult me. Safe meant boring. Safe meant useless. Safe meant I was the child they didn't brag about at the country club. I looked down at my plate, fighting the urge to check the secure, heavy-duty smartphone vibrating against my thigh. If they only knew. If they knew that auditing grain reserves was code for monitoring encrypted communications regarding domestic terror threats. If they knew that my basement office was actually a SCIF, a sensitive, compartmented information facility at a black site 20 miles outside the city. If they knew that while Vanessa was negotiating the price of shipping containers, I was negotiating the release of political hostages in hostile territories. But I couldn't say a word. That was the job. The silence was the price of the clearance. So I cut my roast beef, smiled my bland secretary smile, and said, "Someone has to make sure the paperwork is done." That dynamic continued for years. I watched Vanessa climb the corporate ladder, buying condos and luxury cars, while I drove a modest sedan and lived in a secure apartment complex that my family assumed was just budget-friendly. They gave me gift cards for grocery stores on my birthday. They offered to pay for resume writing workshops so I could get a real career. I endured it all because I loved them and because I knew my work was important. However, the mockery wasn't the only thing brewing in the background. While I was tracking international threats, my family was unknowingly walking straight into one. The conflict began subtly, as these things often do. Nelson Global Imports had been struggling for a few quarters. The market was shifting, tariffs were rising, and my father's old-school tactics weren't working as well as they used to. They needed a win. They needed a massive influx of cash to keep the company afloat and maintain their lavish lifestyle. That was when Vanessa met a man named Julian Vane. Julian was charming, sophisticated, and claimed to represent a consortium of investors looking to move high-end technology into developing markets in Eastern Europe. He promised returns that were, quite frankly, too good to be true. I first heard about Julian at Thanksgiving. Vanessa brought him as a guest. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car, and he had that slick, predatory charm that screams con artist to anyone trained in behavioral analysis. Unfortunately, my family wasn't trained. They were desperate and greedy. Julian spent the entire dinner flattering my father and flirting with Vanessa. When he turned his attention to me, his eyes were dead. "And what do you do, Paisley?" he asked, swirling his wine. "She's a secretary for the government," Vanessa answered for me, rolling her eyes.
If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe. Also, please comment, as your feedback helps to improve the stories coming.
Very hush-hush paperwork. Julian laughed. "Ah, bureaucracy, the enemy of progress." My father raised his glass. "To progress, and to this new partnership. Julian, I think we are going to do great things." My internal alarm bells were ringing so loud I could barely hear the conversation. The next day, I did something I strictly wasn't supposed to do for personal reasons. I ran a background check on Julian Vane. It wasn't easy. The man was a ghost. But I had access to databases that didn't officially exist. I peeled back the layers of shell companies and offshore accounts. What I found made my blood run cold. Julian Vane was a frontman for the Volkov Syndicate, a notorious organized crime ring involved in everything from arms trafficking to money laundering. They were on every watch list in the Western Hemisphere, and they were using Nelson Global Imports as a mule. The plan was simple. They would use my father's legitimate shipping routes to move dual-use technology, stuff that looks innocent but can be used to build weapon guidance systems across borders. If they got caught, the Volkovs would vanish, and my family would be left holding the bag. I tried to warn them. I really did. A week after Thanksgiving, I went to my father's office. It was a glass-walled shrine to his ego, overlooking the city skyline. He looked annoyed to see me, glancing at his watch. "Paisley, I am busy. I have a meeting with Julian in 20 minutes. What is it?" "Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you need to be careful with this deal. I have heard things." He laughed. "Heard things? From who? The other secretaries in the break room? Did you read something on a blog?" "No, Dad. Please listen to me. This guy, Vane, his background is murky. The companies he is associated with have been flagged for regulatory violations." My father stood up, his face reddening. "Regulatory violations? You think you know business better than I do because you file papers for the government? You know nothing, Paisley. You have zero business acumen. That is why you are where you are and Vanessa is where she is." "Dad, it is not about business. It is about legality." "Stop," he snapped. "You are jealous. That is all this is. You see your sister succeeding, bringing in the biggest deal of our lives, and you want to sabotage it because you are miserable in your dead-end job. Go home, Paisley. Let the adults handle the money." I walked out of that office shaking. I had tried. I had broken protocol to warn him, and he had thrown it in my face. Over the next 6 months, I watched the disaster unfold in slow motion. The deal went through. My family was ecstatic. They bought new cars, they renovated the summer house. Vanessa was featured in a local business magazine as a rising star. Meanwhile, I was watching the chatter on the secure networks. The FBI and Interpol were closing in. They had been tracking the Volkov Syndicate for years, and now they had a fresh lead, Nelson Global Imports. The escalation reached its peak in late October. I was at work, sitting in the command center, looking at a wall of screens. My supervisor, a gruff man named Director Sterling, walked up to my station. "Agent Nelson," he said quietly, "we have movement on the Volkov case. The feds are executing warrants tomorrow morning, simultaneous raids." My heart stopped. Where? The warehouse district and the executive offices of the primary front company, Nelson Global. I felt sick. My family was less than 24 hours away from being raided by a tactical team. They were going to be arrested, charged with international arms trafficking, and likely imprisoned for the rest of their lives. I looked at Sterling. "Sir, you know who owns that company." He nodded solemnly. "I do. Your father and sister. The evidence suggests they are unwitting accomplices, but in the eyes of the law, ignorance isn't a defense when you are moving that kind of hardware. Unless what? Unless they cooperate, immediately, and unless someone with high-level authority vouches for them and turns them into assets rather than targets." I knew what I had to do. I had to blow my cover. I had to destroy the carefully constructed lie I had lived for a decade. I left work early that day. I drove to my parents' house. It was a Tuesday, meaning they were all there for the weekly family dinner. The irony was bitter. When I walked in, the mood was jubilant. They were drinking champagne. "Paisley," Vanessa shrieked, "you are late. You missed the toast. We just closed the second phase of the Vane deal. We are going to be rich, rich." I didn't smile. I didn't take off my coat. I stood in the archway of the dining room, looking at them. My mother with her pearls, my father with his cigar, my sister with her blinding ambition. "We need to talk," I said. "Now." My father frowned. "Don't start with your gloom and doom again, Paisley. We're celebrating." "Sit down, Dad," I said. My voice wasn't the voice of the secretary anymore. It was the voice I used when I was debriefing Special Forces teams. It was cold, authoritative, and commanded instant obedience. The room went silent. They had never heard me speak like that. "What is wrong with you?" Vanessa asked, her smile faltering. I walked over to the table and threw a folder down. It was a sanitized version of the dossier I had on Julian Vane. "Read it," I said. My father picked it up. He squinted at the papers. "What is this? Bank routings? Surveillance photos? Where did you get this?" "Julian Vane works for the Volkov Syndicate," I stated flatly. "The technology you are shipping isn't for telecommunications. It is for missile guidance systems. You are trafficking restricted military hardware to a sanctioned nation." Vanessa laughed, but it sounded hysterical. "That is insane. You are watching too many spy movies, Paisley." "Shut up, Vanessa," I snapped. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. "At 0600 hours tomorrow morning," I continued, looking at my father, "federal agents are going to kick down your front door. They are going to raid the offices. They are going to seize every asset you have, freeze every account, and arrest all three of you for treason and international arms trafficking." My mother dropped her champagne glass. It shattered, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. This is ridiculous," my father stammered, but his hands were shaking as he flipped through the dossier. "These photos. This is Julian meeting with—" "That is a known Russian arms dealer," I finished. My father looked up at me, his face pale and waxy. "How do you know this? How could you possibly have access to this? You are a secretary at the Department of Agriculture." I took a deep breath. This was it. The point of no return. I pulled my badge from my inner jacket pocket. It wasn't the generic visitor pass I usually showed them. It was a black leather wallet containing a gold shield and an ID card with a red stripe across the top, indicating top secret SCI clearance. I tossed it onto the table next to the roast beef. "I am not a secretary," I said. "I am a senior intelligence officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency. I run the Counter-Proliferation Task Force. I have been hunting the people you are in bed with for 5 years." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy. suffocating. They looked at the badge, then at me, then back at the badge. It was like their brains were trying to rewrite history, trying to reconcile the daughter they mocked with the woman standing in front of them. You're a spy?" my mother whispered. "Intelligence officer," I corrected. "And right now, I am the only person in the world who can save you." My father slumped into his chair, looking suddenly old and frail. "If what you say is true, if the feds are coming tomorrow, we are finished. We didn't know, Paisley. I swear to God, we didn't know." "It doesn't matter," I said. "You signed the manifests. You took the money. You are liable." Vanessa started to cry. "I can't go to prison. I can't. Paisley, please, you have to help us." The mockery was gone. The arrogance had evaporated. In its place was pure, unadulterated terror. They were looking at me not as the family failure, but as a lifeline. I checked my watch. "We have 12 hours. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to give me everything. Every email, every contract, every text message you have exchanged with Vane. I am going to bring a team in here, my team, to scrub your devices and secure the evidence." "Your team?" my father asked. "Yes." I pulled out my secure phone. "I am going to call Director Sterling. I am going to offer him the Volkov Syndicate on a silver platter in exchange for full immunity for the three of you. I am going to paint you as confidential informants who have been working with me from the beginning to entrap Vane." "But that's a lie," Vanessa sobbed. "Yes," I said, hard. "It is a lie, but it is the only lie that keeps you out of federal prison." I dialed the number. My family watched in awe as I spoke. "Director, this is Agent Nelson, Code Black. I need an extraction team at my location. I have secured the cooperators. We have the evidence to link Vane to the shipment. Yes, they are willing to testify. I am invoking Protocol 7. Bring the cleaners." I hung up and looked at them. They looked like strangers. "They will be here in 20 minutes, I said. "Pack a bag. You can't stay here tonight." The next few hours were a blur of chaos. Black SUVs pulled into the driveway. Men and women in tactical gear and suits swarmed the house. My neighbors must have thought it was the apocalypse. My family stood in the living room, huddled together while my team worked. I was barking orders, coordinating with the FBI liaison, and managing the secure transfer of terabytes of data. At one point, my father approached me. I was reviewing a document on a tablet. He stood there for a long moment, watching me work. He saw the way the other agents, tough, scary-looking people, deferred to me. He saw them call me ma'am and Agent Nelson. "Paisley," he said, his voice trembling. I didn't look up. "Stay out of the way, Dad. We are almost done." I had no idea," he said. "All these years. I thought you were weak?" I finished, finally meeting his eyes. "You thought I was weak because I didn't brag, because I didn't need your validation?" He looked down, ashamed. "I am sorry. I don't need your apology right now, Robert," I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. "I need your compliance. Do exactly what Agent Miller tells you to do." By dawn, the house was secure. The family was moved to a safe house. The raid on the warehouse went ahead as planned, but instead of arresting my family, the FBI swept up Julian Vane and his associates. The evidence we provided, the evidence I fabricated a backstory for, was the nail in their coffin. The aftermath was a long, grueling legal process. My family had to endure months of debriefings. They lost a significant amount of money. The profits from the Vane deal were seized as proceeds of crime. Nelson Global Imports took a massive reputation hit and had to rebrand. They were almost bankrupt, but they were free. About 3 months after the raid, we had another dinner. It was at a smaller house. They had to downsize to cover the legal fees and fines. The dining room was smaller, the table less grand. The atmosphere, however, was entirely different. There was no talk of Vanessa's conquests. She was quiet, humbled, working a mid-level job at a consulting firm because no one trusted her with executive power anymore. My parents were aged, the stress having carved deep lines into their faces. We sat down to eat. My mother brought out a chicken casserole, no more roast beef and expensive wine.
"So," my father said, clearing his throat. He looked at me nervously. "How is work?" I looked up. Everyone stopped eating. They waited for my answer with bated breath. "It is busy," I said simply. "We're monitoring a situation in the South Pacific. I might have to travel next week." Vanessa looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. "Is it dangerous?" I took a bite of the casserole. "It's classified." My father nodded rapidly. "Right, of course, classified." There were no jokes, no sneers, no pitying glances. The balance of power had shifted permanently. They knew now that the quiet woman at the end of the table was the only reason they weren't wearing orange jumpsuits. After dinner, as I was getting ready to leave, my mother stopped me at the door. She grabbed my hand. Her grip was tight. "Paisley," she said, her eyes wet. "Thank you. We didn't deserve it, the way we treated you. We didn't deserve to be saved." I looked at her. I saw the regret. I saw the realization of how close they had come to losing everything. "You are my family," I said. "I protect my country, and that includes you." "But Mom?" "Yes?" "Don't ever buy me a grocery store gift card again." She let out a wet, choked laugh. "I won't, I promise." I walked to my car, still the sensible sedan, though now they knew it was armor-plated. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. They were standing on the porch, watching me go. They used to look at me and see a failure. Now they looked at me and saw a guardian. It took a near-death experience of their entire lifestyle for them to see me. But finally, I was visible. I wasn't the secretary anymore. I was the one who held the shield. And as I merged onto the highway, heading back to the job that actually mattered, I knew that dinner conversations would never be the same again. For years, I sat quietly. Now, I didn't have to speak at all. My silence was no longer empty. It was heavy with a power they finally understood. But the story doesn't fully end there. The true resolution wasn't just in their gratitude. It was in the fundamental restructuring of our lives. The legal fallout continued for a year. Because I had pulled strings, my career took a hit. I was reprimanded for not reporting the conflict of interest sooner. I lost a promotion I had been working toward for 3 years. I didn't tell my family that. I didn't want them to feel guiltier than they already did. Or perhaps I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they had affected my professional life. Vanessa, stripped of her VP title and her high-flying lifestyle, actually became a decent human being. It turned out that stripped of her ego and her expense account, she was just a scared older sister. One Tuesday evening, I went over to her new apartment. It was a 2-bedroom in the suburbs. Nice, but a far cry from the penthouse. We sat on her balcony, drinking cheap beer. "Do you hate us?" she asked suddenly. I looked at her. Hate is a strong word. I hated how you treated me. I hated the arrogance. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really am. I was so caught up in trying to be what Dad wanted. I just pushed everyone else down to make myself feel taller." "I know," I said. "Can I ask you something?" She hesitated. "That night, when you called your team, if you hadn't, would they really have come for us?" I took a swig of beer. "Vanessa, if I hadn't made that call, you would be in a federal holding cell right now awaiting trial. You would be facing 20 years minimum. Julian Vane is currently in a Supermax facility. That was your future." She shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter. "You saved our lives, literally." "I did." "Why? After everything we said?" I looked out at the suburban streetlights. "Because despite everything, you're my sister, and because it's my job to stop bad things from happening, even if the people involved are idiots." She laughed, a genuine sound. "Yeah, we were idiots." The reconciliation wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness. My father still struggled with his loss of status, and sometimes he'd get moody and snap at people. But he never snapped at me. Never again. Whenever I walked into a room, he would stand up. It was a small gesture, an old-school sign of respect he used to reserve for his business partners. Now he did it for his daughter. The climax of our new dynamic came the following Christmas. We were opening gifts. Usually, this was the time for my annual humiliation, the practical gifts for the struggling secretary. My father handed me a small box. "Go ahead," he said. I opened it. Inside was a key. "It's not a car," he said quickly. "It's a safe deposit box. I put what's left of the family trust in there. I want you to be the executor. I want you to control the assets." I stared at him. "Dad, this is—" "I can't be trusted with it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I almost lost it all. "Vanessa is, well, she's learning, but she's not ready. You are the only one with a head on your shoulders. You are the only one who sees the world as it actually is." I closed the box and held it tight. "Thank you, Dad." He nodded, blinking back tears. "No, thank you, Director Nelson. It was a joke, but it wasn't. It was an acknowledgement of who I really was. They mocked my job for a decade. They laughed at my files and my boring life. But in the end, the boring secretary was the only one with the power to rewrite their fate. I saved them from their own greed, and in doing so, I finally saved myself from their judgment. Now, when I go to work in the basement, scanning the dark corners of the world for threats, I do it with a lighter heart. I know that at the next family dinner, the silence won't be filled with mockery. It will be filled with respect. And that is a clearance level you can't just apply for. You have to earn it.